allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Again, welcome, everyone, and Ms. Scott, if you would certify quorum for us.
Yes, ma'am. Town of Ashland, Mr. Hodges,
Here.
Ms. Barnhart. Charles City County, Mr. Atkins,
Present.
Mr. Patterson. Chesterfield County, Mr. Carroll, Mr. Holland. And Ms. Schneider. Here. Dr. Miller. Goochland County, Mr. Lyle, Mr. Botters. Hanover County, Mr. Davis.
Present.
Ms. Pritchard, Mr. Hudson. Henrico County, Mr. Cooper, Vice Chair Bogish, Mr. Schmidt. New Kent County, Mr. Moyer,
Here.
Ms. Stewart. Powhatan County, Mr. Kinney, Ms. Morissette, Mr. McClung, Mr. Powers. City of Richmond, Mr. Addison, Ms. Jordan, Chair Newbill,
Here.
Ms. Robertson. Capital Region Airport Commission, Mr. Rutledge. GRTC, Ms. Torres. Here. Ms. Adams. RMTA, Ms. Dean. VDOT, Mr. Totten. Mr. Riblet.
Here.
CTAC, Ms. Erickson. Here. Thank you. Mr. Holland.
She's online.
Department of Aviation, Mr. Harrington.
Present.
DRPT, Ms. Dubinsky.
Here.
Mr. Hudson. FTA, Mr. Koenig. Federal Highway Administration, Mr. Nelson. Mr. Rucker.
Here.
Ride Finders, Ms. Ruffin. Here. Mr. O'Keefe. Thank you. That concludes the roll call for attendance. 1, 2. And we do have a quorum. Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you. At this time, I will ask if you would please look at the meeting agenda to ascertain if there are any amendments you'd like to have considered. Oh, okay, so I need to, so I have to do that.
She has said that it's July.
So I'll do that. Okay, are there any amendments for consideration to the agenda? Seeing none, the agenda will be as stand. At this point, I have received notice that there is a desire for remote participation from, we have 2 individuals. We have Barbara Nelson,
Yes, ma'am.
principal residence location more than 60 miles from the meeting location. And Sarah Erickson, a personal matter specifically scheduling conflict. I would like to now entertain a motion to confirm that we would approve.
So moved. Second.
Do you want to call for a full vote? We don't need to.
I just update the roll after this approval to indicate the presence of the remote participants.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
Just to
so
let you know-
sorry to
So we
interrupt.
still,
I'm so sorry. Dr. Newbill, this
Yes.
is Catherine Jordan. I'm participating virtually because I'm homesick.
oh,
Thank
okay.
you.
Thank you, Ms. Jordan. Will you include Ms. Jordan as well?
Yes.
And
thank
so
you.
might I have an amendment to the motion to include Ms. Jordan's participation?
Second.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. With that, we'll proceed to the next item, and because we have a lengthy agenda, I will have no full report this time, except to say that
It was announced in executive, and we will share here that there are squirrels tickets available. And they will be available for Friday the 6th and Saturday the 7th p.m. You can see Sid or Martha for tickets if you are interested. Okay? So moving right along, are there any persons present who would like to provide public comment? Okay, seeing none, let's move on to the review of the board minutes for July 11 on page 5. And we'll ask for a motion upon your review.
Move for approval, ma'am?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Yes, I'm sorry, Mr. Hodges.
If my vote could, I would like to abstain. I was not at the meeting.
Duly noted.
Thank you.
Thank you. With that, Ms. Schickel, we'll move to the Secretary's report.
Thank you. I have 3 items for you this morning. Many of you have at your seats who are around the table, and we have, I believe, the ability to publish up on the screen the QR code, if you are so inclined. I know Mr. Moyer has already done the work to register. It was quick and easy, right? Not so bad.
It's not that bad. I have a 9-year-old granddaughter, so she taught me how to do it.
Well, thank you to her. I'm really pleased and grateful for the just generosity from the Port of Virginia. So Ms. Nelson, thank you so much for what you and your team have done to put this together with Thomas Cross. Our team has been working with the Port of Virginia team to put together this event for scheduled for October 3rd. You can register. The Eventbrite registration is active and live, and we're really excited about being able to put this on. The team at the Port of Virginia has put together a great day, an agenda that will include a trip down to the Hampton Roads. We will be boarding one of the Spirit of Something ships to be able to navigate around the waterways in Hampton Roads and see from a really unique vantage point the port facilities there, and it's just going to be a really amazing experience. We will have representatives from the Port of Virginia with us to be able to talk about the business and the activity of the port, and then we'll finish the day visiting the Port of Richmond here in our region and be able to get an update on the barge service that has been so phenomenal for our communities. So we're really excited about that. It will be a day-long event. Due to security and other matters, we are asking people to commit to the bus service that's being provided by GRTC. So thank you so much, Ms. Torres. We really appreciate that support. And from a security perspective, it'll be a lot easier if we're all able to travel together. And we will have information about where we can park cars. It'll be at a centralized location, hopefully as near as possible. We're confirming that now, but as near as possible to the Port of Richmond facility, so that when it is time to leave, you don't have too far of a commute back to your car. And then the last thing I'll say is we are aware that many of you are probably planning to participate in the Zoning Atlas launch event that's hosted by Partnership for Housing Affordability and Housing Virginia that evening. And so we will definitely make sure that we are wrapped so that you have time to get back to your car and make the trip over to University of Richmond. And we've been coordinating with that team as well. So certainly if there are any questions, Janice or I or Dorian Allen on our team who's back in the back, can help you, but you'll also receive the invitation electronically in your email inbox so that you can see the invitation to register there as well. Next item is an action item that we are requesting. As I've just announced, we have this trip planned for October 3rd, so we are requesting that the executive and policy board committee meetings be canceled for October 3rd. And this event is happening in lieu of, in place of a regular business meeting. So there will be no business meeting on October 3rd, just simply the field trip. So if it's the pleasure of the policy board, we would be asking for action on that.
Members, Do we have anyone for whom that would be a concern? Might I have a motion for the cancellation?
So moved.
All those,
I'll second.
thank you. All those in favor? Thank you.
Thank you, appreciate that. So I'll just make a note that this is already on the published calendar, but the next business meeting of the policy board will be on October 31st. That's moved up a week to avoid conflicts with the November regular time frame. So just keep that, it should already be in your calendars, but just keep that as a mental note. The next business meeting for executive committee and policy board will be on the 31st. And then finally, my last item is the work status reports. These were provided as handouts out in the front, and there should be some available at your tables too. We've included both the quarterly report and the annual report that were submitted on Friday to the departments of DRPT and VDOT, and are happy to answer any questions if you have, but the annual report is the culmination of the series of quarterly reports, so the fourth quarter is really the new information that this board hasn't seen before, summarizing the activities by month as well as the expenditures according to each of the work codes in the Unified Planning Work Program. So if no questions, I would request a motion to accept the work status reports as presented, or I'm happy to also answer questions.
Are there any questions at this time?
I move approval of the work status report as presented.
Okay,
Second?
thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
One question, however, regarding the trip on October 3rd, is there a deadline to register or it's wide open?
I believe,
That you,
yes, I think 2 weeks ahead. I don't remember the exact date that we put on the registration. 21st, thank you.
okay, thank you.
20th.
20th, okay, thank you. Just want to make sure.
That's really just to make sure that we have the transportation necessary and the
Logistics, yeah.
other logistical arrangements set for the trip.
Thank you. Just curious.
Yes.
What time will that conclude and what time will we be back here? Because we have an event that night at 7 o'clock.
The target is for it to be finished by 5 o'clock, am I correct?
I believe we're thinking we'll be back in at your cars by 4. May go, if we're later traffic, things like that, it may be 5, but I don't expect it to be.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. We'll proceed with new business and the first report. Ariel?
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the board. I'm going to present you about the long-range transportation plan update, the general scope of work, the schedule, and the formation of the advisory working group. So let me make this full screen. Okay. Yeah, it's not. Okay, so what is the long-range transportation plan? Most of you probably know long-range transportation plan. It's also called the Metropolitan Transportation Plan, Constrained Long-Range Transportation Plan. It is one of the core products for the Metropolitan Planning Organization, like us, along with the UPWP and the TIP. Those are the 3 core products of the MPO. It's a decision-making tool and a dynamic living document which projects the reasonably significant transportation needs in the Richmond region for the next 20 years and beyond. So the LRTP develops a vision and goals based on the public sentiments as well as the board's desire, but also it reflects the application of those goals into tram station projects, and those projects are prioritized for the next 25 years. It is important for the tram station project to be in the long-range transportation plan, constraint plan, because to receive any federal or state money, that project, the reasonably significant project, has to be in the long-range transportation plan. If the project is not in the long-range transportation plan, then we need to amend the long-range transportation plan to add that project so that we can seek for further federal funding. So the long-range transportation plan must be updated every 5 years so that it remains consistent with the existing conditions, with the priorities of the region, because as we all know, the priorities change. The existing long-range transportation plan, Connect RV 2045, it expires on October 4th, 2026. So we need to have the new long-range transportation plan. We haven't decided a brand name for that, and Martha might have an update on that. But that plan needs to be updated by October 4th of 2026, so that we have a continuous flow of federal funds in our region. So what does the code say? The Code of Federal Regulations requires this. It's one of the core functions, as I mentioned. The Code of Virginia also supports this. This is one of the core responsibilities of the Metropolitan Planning Organization. So who is this plan for? So the end users and the implementers, this plan is for them. The end users is obviously the users of Richmond Region's transportation systems. So that includes almost all residents of the Richmond region, except for maybe some institutionalized population. Other than that, everybody use transportation system in the Richmond region. It also is for the people who pass through our region using our interstate, maybe from I-64, I-95, or using Amtrak or any of the other arterials. It's for them as well. And along with people, the long-range transportation plan is for goods and freight movement as well. It is very much important that the goods and freight movement is flawless in our region as well, whether it's inter-regional or whether it's freight movement outside our region or coming into our region as well. And the implementers of the transportation projects are basically you guys sitting in this board, the localities, all the 9 localities of the Richmond region, state agencies, VDOT and DRPT, because they implement projects, GRTC, implementers of transit projects, as well as CVTA, who can fund projects and implement them as well. So the LRTP scope of work was attached, a very general scope of work was attached with the agenda, but I'm going to briefly talk about the general scope. To make it easy, we have divided the whole process of the long-range transportation plan into 8 phases. So we are asking you to approve the scope now, but the work for the long-range transportation plan has already begun since we adopted the last long-range transportation plan. The first step, how does the future look like, was basically the development of the baseline data, what we call as the socioeconomic data, that projects the population, employment, and other socioeconomic factors for the future year, the horizon year 2050. And that was adopted by this board last year already. The second phase, this is something new which we are doing first time in the history of this organization, is the scenario analysis. So normally we only have one baseline future condition. This time we are evaluating more than one. So it states that what if there is more than one possible future? And I'll be talking about that in a little bit more detail in my next presentation, which is about the pathways of the future, which is the brand name of the scenario analysis which we did. The third phase is basically the board's vision as well as goals and guiding principles on what we want our transportation system look like in the future. So that is what it's called as what matters most for the future, in which we'll be developing a vision based on the Plan RVA strategic plan. That vision would be for everything, but this would be taken out from that specifically for the transportation system for the reason. Then we'll have the goals as well as objectives, and we'll have what we call as the performance measures, which is the technical mechanism to measure, quantitatively measure those goals and objectives. So that would be developed in this third phase. After that, we are calling the fourth phase, what are the transportation issues to be addressed? So there might be a lot of transportation issues in the region. It might be a mobility issue, a congestion issue, interconnectivity issue, accessibility issue, those kind of issues which we try to solicit from the general public, from the localities, from the tools which we have developed, like the regional travel demand model, which can also look at not just the existing needs, but the future needs as well. So all of these needs would be made into an inventory and would be passed along to our champions. The champions are basically the project implementers. So if it's an interstate project, we want VDOT to be the champions. If it's anything related with rail, DRPT to be the champions. Any roadway project within the localities would be the champion. So once we have that inventory, we would send that inventory to the localities so that they can vet that and probably add some more. Recently, we heard one of the issues which the town of Ashland is facing. So based on the study, Richmond to DC rail study, by 2045, the hours of delay in Ashland would be significantly higher than what it was in 2015. Similarly, the tracks which are proposed by that study would be insufficient for the number of trains passing through. So that is one of the needs which is a priority for Ashland. So that kind of need would be in that inventory, which we will send to the champions to address. So once we have that transportation issues or needs listed out, then we'll go to the engineering phase, a little bit more technical phase, to convert those needs into transportation projects. So some of those needs have already been studied. So VDOT does a lot of studies. We have a lot of regional studies done, multimodal regional studies done as well, which already have provided solutions for those kind of needs. So those projects which are reasonably significant would be listed in another inventory, in which we will call that the universe of reasonably significant projects. And anything which we haven't studied yet, we'll be working with VDOT and locality staffs to develop solutions for those needs. So I just wanted to give you an idea that needs are not projects. A need can be solved by different solutions. So giving you a very simple example, if there's a congestion, we can simply add a lane. That might be a easiest solution, but we can think about other innovative ideas as well. There could be transit there. We could add a park and ride lot there. We could have we could focus on carpools and van pools so that there is a reduction in congestion. So there could be different solutions to those needs. So needs are a different set of things, and we'll try to address all of those needs in the universe of projects. So that is what we are calling at the options. What are the options phase for the long-range transportation plan? Then we think about the budget, the money, which is the real thing. So we project the budget and the funds which might be available to us through 2050, through state and federal funds, as well as CBTA funds, and we develop a budget. So last time, I think we had some $5 billion. Off the top, I think 40 to 30% goes into maintenance, so whatever remains is for new projects. So in that phase, how can we realistically get there? We have that budget, and from the universe of projects, we have those projects. So obviously, in an ideal situation, we would have the budget to fund all the projects, but that's not the case, as we all know. So we need to develop a prioritization process so that we prioritize the most important projects in our region. So that would be done in that phase. So, and then what comes out of that phase is the fruit of the long-range transportation planning process, which is called as the constraint plan, which is a list of projects. So once that is done, then we will evaluate the plan, like how did we do in terms of what was the economic impact of the long-range transportation planning projects, how did it change, comparing with the no-bill situation, how did it change the congestion, how did it change the accessibility to our people, those kind of things would be evaluated, which is also a requirement. And then finally, we'll be asking this board for adoption. So this is a cyclic process, as you can see. So once we adopt the plan, immediately after that, we'll be starting working on the 2055 or maybe 2060 plan, in which we'll develop the data for the 2055 and 2060 baseline data. So along with the technical process, the public outreach is a major component for the long-range transportation planning process. So it's throughout this process. Then we have some of the formal public review process as well. So there is a general outreach in which we'll be seeking input from the public, and that's towards the beginning in the third and the fourth phases, in which we'll be seeking most of the input from the public. But each phase would have, once we finalize the product of that phase, each phase would have a formal public review period as well. And after each phase, this board would approve each phase so that we can go into the subsequent phases. And I think Martha will be talking a little bit more about our public engagement strategy after I finish my presentation. And then we have the advisory working group. So the long-range transportation plan advisory working group has always been formed when we develop the long-range transportation plan. So that group provides input and oversight for the development of the plan. It has the autonomy to make technical decisions guiding the process and outcomes. However, unless this board approves each phase, it won't progress. So after the LRTP advisory work group approves anything, that would naturally come to this board for approval. So the composition of the long-range transportation plan advisory working group is basically the TAC. Everybody in the TAC is invited to sit. A few CTAC members. So we have in CTAC locality members as well as at-large members. So at this time, we are inviting the at-large members who are interested and who can commit to be in the long-range transportation plan advisory committee to sit in the advisory group as well. And then we also plan to invite some of the other folks, interested parties, which could be a transit advocate or a bike ped advocate, those people who advocate into different things in the region who are pretty much active. So those people would also be included in the group. So over the course of 2 years, we'll have 15 to 18 meetings. Some of the meetings would be in person and some of the meetings would be virtual. So what I'm asking the board is basically two things: that you approve the general scope, the schedule, which cannot be changed. It has to be done by September of 2026 to serve as a general guidance to staff and the long-range transportation plan advisory working group. And secondly, that the board approves the establishment of the working group itself. I'll be happy to answer any questions if you have.
Questions at this time?
Madam Chair,
Mr. Hodges.
I didn't have a question. I wanted to thank Mr. Ariel for bringing up the Ashland issue. A concern by 2050, we're concerned that we have a significant blockage of our major thoroughfare through the town. And we appreciate the fact that it'll be incorporated in the study. Thank you, Mr. Ariel. Thank you.
Thank you. If there are no other questions, might I have a motion?
Motion approved.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor, if you would say aye.
Thank you.
Bless you.
Pathways to the Future.
So I'll be speaking about the pathways to the future, which is the comprehensive scenario planning process for the Richmond region. This is the first time in which we are doing the scenario planning process for the Richmond region. So just to give you a little bit of background, scenario planning is a strategic planning approach to develop, compare and test different future scenarios. So scenarios represent alternative future conditions that responds to the drivers, and I'll be talking about the drivers, as shift in external forces which are not within our control. The external forces are not in our control, or the consequences of policy changes which are somehow within our control, played over time. So most of us know visioning, which is one form of scenario planning that is basically targeted towards the end states and the outcomes rather than the external forces and uncertainty. Whereas our scenario planning process is an exploratory scenario planning process in which we are looking not at the end result or choosing one particular scenario, but we are looking at all the different scenarios which might be there and looking at those external forces and drivers which are beyond our control. So it has been a long road to scenario planning in this organization. It started with Federal Highway hosting a scenario planning peer exchange back in 2014. So it's been 10 years since now. And I think Mr. Rucker remembers that. It was a long time back.
Oh, you had to call him back.
After that, to gain insight of the scenario planning process in general, staff participated in a national level organization called the Consortium of Scenario Planning, so that we can learn what other regions are doing in this field. And finally, now, today, we finished our first exploratory scenario planning process, the Pathways to the Future. And I'll be asking for you to adopt this plan. So, one other thing is that I just wanted to mention the code requirement. Scenario planning is not mandatory, but Federal Highway recommends using scenario planning for long-range planning process. So it's a recommendation now, but who knows, it might change in the future as a requirement. So this is the framework we used in applying scenario planning, exploratory scenario planning process in the Richmond region. So we have the region today, and as I mentioned, there are a lot of forces of change which might be beyond our control. Some of them might be our control, within our control, and some of them might not be. So we looked at all those different change forces and tried to use them as inputs to develop different scenarios, and I'll be talking about that much more detail later on. And based on that input, we develop different scenarios. Once we have that narration, to get a qualitative and quantitative results, we need to model those scenarios. So we need to develop that data and the tools so that we can model and get the results for those scenarios. So we model that, and then based on the results, we get to know what happens when we grow like this or we grow like that, so that we have what we need as information so that we can make decisions for tomorrow. So the scenario planning process was led by an advisory committee. It was a 17-member advisory committee from state, regional, as well as in some cases national expert as well. And it was not limited to transportation. The field of expertise, as you can see, was transportation. We had like 6 or 7 people from representing transportation, land use, community development, environment, emergency management, housing, energy, economic development, and community health. So wide fields were represented so that everybody has a voice. So their main role was to review the models which we developed, the data, the scenarios, guide the public and stakeholder engagement, and also to receive update on progress. So that we can get a direction based on the individual locality as well as the organization which they are representing, so that we can get their perspective when we develop this process as well. Also, for this process, we hired a group of consultants. So we had a group of 4 different firms, some of them national level consultants, working to develop this plan as well. So the project, we started this project way before 2022. Staff spent an enormous amount of time learning about scenario planning and developing a scope which was customized for our region. And it's a very comprehensive extraterritorial scenario planning process in which we are not just touching the transportation sector, but other sectors as well. Normally, when a regional organization like ours do scenario planning, the focus is on transportation, but we wanted to make sure that this is not just transportation related and it touches other sectors as well, so that it's a comprehensive process. So we made sure that that happens. So the SPAC met for 6 times during the course of 2 years. We had briefed the policy board at the beginning of this process, which was back in, I think, January of 2022. And we had, in between the process, 2 public engagement periods as well. And I'll be talking about a little bit detail of that later on. And then once the process was done, we presented it to TAC. I presented it to TAC in 2 meetings, a much more detailed presentation to the TAC. And then I'm asking for this board for the adoption today. So I was talking about the drivers, or we can call as disruptors or forces of future changes. So what we did, based on the SPAC input as well as the survey input from the general public, we developed these disruptors and put them into buckets of 4 big buckets. So we put the disruptors into 4 big buckets of community, technology, economy, and resiliency. So in community, we talked about things like population dynamics, so overall growth. The age structure, as we know, it's changing. We are growing older. I think 1 in every 3 person would be above age 60 by 2050. The household size is shrinking. The household composition is changing. So we looked at all these different things. I won't talk about all of these, but I would mention some of those. So settlement demand dynamics, the locational preferences, housing preferences, school preferences, settlement supply, the housing stock, the affordability, and then obviously political dynamics. Then also technology, we talked about the transportation technology dynamics, the connected and automated vehicle, the self-driving cars, which is a big issue and which might be a very real thing in the future. Automated freight, parking management system, the mode shift. We already have micromobility in the region now. High-speed rail might be a real thing by then. Active transportation might be more, so all those different things. And then we also touched into other things like broadband, solar farm, 3D printing, chat GPT, those kind of things, which might automate a lot of things. And then in economy, we talked about global, national economic dynamics, the regional dynamics, as well as the employment workforce dynamics. And then in resiliency, we talked about climate changes, sea level rises, flooding, pandemic like COVID-19, which could be a real thing, who knows? Environmental dynamics like clean energy, carbon reduction, those kind of things. So all these drivers were used to develop scenarios. Some of these drivers can be like quantitatively defined and some of them might not be. So we took the ones which can be modeled and can be defined, but then the scenario narratives talks about all those different things. So how did we create scenario narrative? So as I mentioned, the drivers are the input for the scenario narratives. So here is an example of a sliding bar, and it gives example of a few things like population. It could be low or high. We could change the sliding bar wherever we want. The economy, more growth, reduction, development, we could conserve, we could build. Similarly, the climate, extreme, or it could be stable. So we looked at all of the drivers which could be modeled, not everything can be modeled, and tried to create something like this so that we can create different scenarios. So based on all these drivers' preferences, we developed scenario narratives, and when the scenario narratives were developed, and then we modeled those scenario narratives. So that was the process. So finally, we came up with 5 scenarios. The baseline scenario is what basically which this board has already approved. So it's the baseline scenario is based on the adopted comprehensive plans of the localities, keeping to the status quo. And we can see that there is more suburban growth, whereas there is a little bit more growth in the core city as well, more denser development, but we can see major development in the suburbs. There is acceptance of technology. So even in our baseline scenario, we assume that there would be certain penetration of connected and automated vehicles in the future, because that's a real thing now. Then we had the back to future scenario, and as the name suggests, it's a high growth scenario as compared to the baseline, but most of the growth are in rural areas as well as the suburbs. It's a more car-centric development, and the responses to global changes are not proactive, it's reactive, so it's after the fact. But this scenario is high growth scenario. Talking about baseline so that you get a point of reference. The baseline is 2050, and it's compared from our base year data, which is like 2017 was our base year data. So we compare everything from that. So the growth in our region was 34% when we compare from 2017 to 2050 in baseline for population, and 31% in employment. That's a very conservative approach. Whereas if you look at the high growth scenario, the growth is 60%, both in employment and population. So it's a little bit more aggressive kind of scenario when we look at growth. Similarly, Ecotopia, as the name suggests, it's a high growth scenario, but it has more compact growth. It talks about reducing carbon footprint, more denser development, green infrastructure, more uses of transit and active transportation, and other multimodal system of transportation. This scenario is also similar to the Back to Future in terms of growth. So 60% growth when we compare from 2017 for both population and employment. And then we have the May and Safe scenario, which is a medium growth scenario like the baseline, but the only difference is that it is a much more compact growth scenario as compared to baseline. So, the response is highly local, so it's hyper local. Whereas in Ecotopia, the response is from the region, not from the localities. In May and Safe, it's a hyper local situation in which each locality has their own response system. And then finally, we have, I wouldn't call it a dystopian scenario, but it is a little bit, if we compare from baseline, that scenario, we still have certain growth, but it's lesser than the baseline. So we see 16% growth in both population, and so it's a low growth scenario. It's still growing, it's not decreasing from what we have now. But basically, we assume that there is gonna be man-made destruction as well as climate crisis, and there would be an exodus of population employment from our region. The anchor jobs would leave, there would be a problem, affordability and those kind of things. So that's the RVA sinks scenario. So yeah, this slide talks about the growth, as I already mentioned. So low growth, the RVA sinks is 16% as from 2017, both for employment and population. Medium growth is baseline and Mayhem safe. It's 34% population and 31% employment. And high growth is Back to Future as well as Ecotopia. Both have 60% growth in population and employment, but the location or the development pattern is different. Even though the growth numbers or the numbers are same, the pattern is different. So once we have the model, the scenario narratives, we want to evaluate those scenarios in a quantitative manner. So to do that, we developed a suite of integrated models. To be precise, 11 integrated models, and the key is the land use allocation model. So once we have the control total and we know where we are predicting growth, the actual area of growth, the land use allocation model allocates that, and the outcome of that land use model goes into other different downstream model to give us what we call as the performance measures of all these different scenarios. So we have the travel demand model, which gives us the transportation projections for the future, what would be the congestion, those kind of things. We have the accessibility model. How does this change in terms of accessibility to destinations? We have that. We also have the mobile emission model. So based on the congestion and the accessibility, what would be the change in mobile emissions, the carbon greenhouse gases, those kind of things. We also looked at simple models like the building emission model, the water consumption model. If there's more growth, obviously there's going to be more consumption of water, but we normalized it to per capita to see whether this scenario is really good in terms of water consumption or energy uses. And then we had some environmental related model. We developed the land cover model, the pollutant runoff model, system resiliency model to see what would be the acreage of land which might be affected by flooding or sea level rise or wildfire prone areas, those kind of things, and what would be the population or the household affected by that. So we looked at that as well. And then finally, we developed the economic model to look at what would be the economic consequences of this model, as well as a community health model to see what would be the health impact within different scenarios. So we had 11 predictive models, and they gave us outcomes, which are basically performance measures, which we can compare each scenario with. So 11 predictive models gave us 70 performance measures. So that's a lot to visualize. So what we did was that we thought that we should combine those performance measures into indices so that it's easier for us to understand. So based on those 65 performance measures, we came up with 8 indices: healthy living indices, smart growth indices, index, access to markets, business impacts, technology, cost of living, and then the accessibility. So all those performance measures were combined for these 8 indices. And then we look at our scenarios in terms of these 8 indices. The next slide. So this slide shows us the 4 scenarios and the indices and how did they do. So basically a higher number is more desirable in this. So the needle pointing towards the right is the most desirable. Even for the cost of living, if it's higher number, that is the most desirable outcome. And we can see that, and this was all compared to the baseline. So those are not absolute numbers. These are all compared to the baseline scenario, which the board has already approved. Again, it's per capita. So everything, so if it's more growth, obviously there's going to be more consumption of water and electricity and energy. To compare apples to apples, we normalize the growth to per capita. So this, what we are seeing is the per capita. So we can see that Ecotopia is the clear winner in this, in most of the indices, followed by May and Safe. That is due to its more compact development, as well as carbon-friendly footprint, as well as other introduction of other modes, as well as things which we try to conserve in energy and water consumption. So each scenario actually takes those things into account. So the final thing is I just wanted to give you a heads up on the public engagement of this process. We had 2 phases of public engagement. The first phase was, the goal was to create a public understanding of what scenario planning is and why it is useful for us. We had 2 major things done. The first thing was SRET. It was an invitation-only SRET for regional experts to look at the strength and weaknesses of our region, the current strength and weaknesses, and the future opportunities and threats. So it was a SWOT analysis, but the first strength and the weakness was for the existing condition, and the opportunities and the threats were for the future condition. So 50+ participants were there. We got good results, outcome from that, in which we used that process. Secondly, we also had a MetroQuest survey, and in which we asked the general public about Richmond region's future concerns and hopes. And we had a good participation. We had 474 participants actually submitting or responding to that surveys. So we used all those inputs when we developed the drivers as well as the scenarios. So this was towards the very beginning of the process. And then we had the second public engagement phase, in which was done after the scenario narratives were developed and after we had the results of the scenarios. So this phase of public engagement was basically to understand scenario results and implications. So again, we had a second SRET to discuss the risk and opportunities of the different scenarios, and overall the uses of scenario planning, and whether the scenarios which were created were plausible enough so that we can use it in further studies. So again, we had a 50+ participants, and it was a good meeting, and we got very good comments from the participants. The other part was a public survey and a scenario selected exercise. So it basically, we would give the general public an option of what you like, and they would choose different options, and based on their responses, they would see one of the 4 scenarios. So it was an interactive mechanism so that we can seek their attention. They also reviewed the results and provided some comments as well, which were incorporated in our process. So to iterate the purpose and the aspiration for this process is mainly first to stress test different future, to look at the different future and see how we are doing in terms of all those different things, in terms of transportation, in terms of energy usage, in terms of pollution, all those things, in terms of health benefits, in terms of economic development, as well as what would be the economic changes in different scenarios. So stress test was one of the major purpose of this exercise. The second one was to use the outcome, which is basically the scenario results, the evaluations and the implications in our ingoing plans and programs in various strategic areas in Plan RBE, including transportation, community development, as well as environment. And then finally, to develop an analytical toolkit, the tools and the models which we develop in this process, which can be used in not only any long-term predictive analysis, but can be used in a short-term predictive analysis as well. And it could be used in any specific geography. It doesn't have to be the region. It could be a TAG, which is a small geography, which is a sub-jurisdictional level, small geography. We have 875 TAGs in the region. So we could look at each individual TAGs for any changes. It could be at the jurisdictional level. It could be at the regional level as well. So these are the main purpose and aspirations of this process. So as I mentioned, we plan to use this scenario planning process in our long-range transportation planning process as well. Exactly how we are going to use it, that's up to discussion, and it will be a major discussion with the long-range transportation plan advisory working group, but we'll come up with the right uses of using this process. And then we are also planning to use this process in other areas. In environment, we are developing a green infrastructure plan, which would also be using some portions of this exercise as well. After that, I just wanted to make sure that you understand what we are asking you for. So basically, we are asking you for two things. One is that you adopt this process as presented by staff. And the second thing is you authorize us to use these tools and scenarios developed in this process for any long-range regional transportation planning studies or plans, so that we can use this in any capacity. It could be 3 levels of applicability. We could just use the themes. We could use this for visioning or exploration, or we could use this for actually identifying the priorities in that particular plan. So it could be various levels of applicability. So that's all I have. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer. We had attached the executive summary of this process, which is basically what I presented today. But there is other documents as well, a process document which was sent as a link. And then if you are interested, we have a very thick technical document as well. It wasn't sent to the policy board, but if anybody is interested, we certainly have that as well.
Thank you, Mr. Ariel. Are there any questions at this time? We're being asked to address two really resolutions. First, the planning process itself that's been delineated, and then our agreement to apply it for long-range regional transportation study and plan. So if there are no questions, might I have a motion? And we'll take them one at a time. First, the planning process itself.
So moved, Madam Chair, planning process
Second.
to the future.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Then the application for long-range regional transportation study and planning. Might I have a motion?
Likewise, approval, pathways, and the tools as well.
Might I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, great
Been
job.
quite illuminating, and certainly the strategy here, I think, is something that will bode well for us as we do our planning moving forward, so thank you.
Madam Chair,
Yes?
I just thought it was funny when you said that's all I had.
Dan chuckled.
That's it.
Oh, there's more in a big manual.
You can find more.
Yeah, I got you.
Good job.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Ms. Ramos?
Hi, thank you.
Sorry.
Sorry, I'm good with technology, but I'm not that good with technology. Still need the mouse. This is mine. Gotta go back to Teams. Wrong one. And then. So, good morning, I'm Carrie. I'm gonna talk to you about the 5310 projects we have today. If anyone has any questions, please don't hesitate to let me know. So for starters, we're gonna go through the transportation planning process. This is a project that is in the authorized project phase. This is the double check before we go ahead and do anything else, and we just wanna make sure that everything is good to go before we do anything too big that we can't take back. Just so for some background, the TIP plans investments and federal obligations for the next 4 years. And so for all of these projects, there's a few in this, so just bear with me. After the last TAC meeting, DRPT had a couple changes based on FTA's suggestions that they wanted to have reflected in this for everybody to see. And they've now been included in the documents and materials, so the tables in this are the most up-to-date and ready to go that we can have. And new amendments require an amendment. New projects require an amendment. They also require fiscal constraint, conformity review, public review, and RRTPO approval. So the first project we've got going on. There we go, sorry. Okay, so the first project we have is Heart Havens Inc. They received a grant from the FTA 5310 program to buy 9 passenger vans with handicap accessible lifts. The purpose is to improve community integration by providing safe transportation for all individuals with disabilities or developmental disabilities in Richmond. It is inside of a former ozone maintenance area. However, it is classified as exempt. In fiscal year 24, we have fiscal year 24, 5310 funding, we have $131,000. Fiscal year 24, local funding, we have $35,000. Fiscal year 25, 5310, we have $128,000. And then fiscal year 25, local funding, we have $32,000. Fiscal year 26, 5310, we have $128,000. Fiscal year 26, local funding, we have $32,000. And then fiscal year 27, we have 5310, we have $128,000. Fiscal year 26, for local funding, we have $32,000. And then for total, we have $646,000. So again, all of that is reflected on this table. Next project up, we have GRTC, the GRTC 100 project. This again is funded by the FTA Section 5310 funding. It is a program to continue travel.
Mr. Ramos, I'm sorry.
Question on the first one, so total
Mr.
local
Carroll.
match is 137,000, is that right?
I believe so.
I just wanted to make sure, so what we're gonna be asking to put up is the local match, is that right?
Yes. Well, I don't know that we're funding it. Sorry.
Sure, the local match is coming from Heart Havens, so that's not local match. There's no request for funding on any of these from the TPO.
Okay.
Sorry.
Thank you.
And then, so GRTC is going to also be doing the travel training program for seniors and individuals with disabilities. This is gonna enable safe and independent travel across the Richmond region for work, school, healthcare, and community activities. Again, this is inside the former ozone maintenance area, but it is classified as exempt. For fiscal year 24, 5310, $37,500 for the state. In the same year, it will be $30,000. Local funding will be $7,500, and then in total will be $75,000. And so again, these projects are exempt. And for this one, the major change that happened was these funds were previously in fiscal year 25 and are now in fiscal year 24. For SOAR 365, we also have received FTA funding to replace body-on chassis vehicles with lifts and 4 passenger vans with minivans, or passenger minivans with ramps. This is to enhance transportation for individuals, to support access to jobs through the supported employment program, and to promote independent and productive lives. This is also inside the former ozone maintenance area, and it is classified as exempt. The funding for this one for fiscal year '24 in the 5310 category is going to be $247,372. In fiscal year '24 for the local category, it is going to be $61,843. And then moving on to the Chesterfield Community Services Board, they have also received FTA 5310 funding to acquire 15 passenger wheelchair lifts and replacement tablets with mounting equipment for trip planning software to improve transportation for individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities and mental illness, to enhance access to employment, community integration, and social programs. Again, this is inside of the former ozone maintenance area, however, it is also classified as exempt. So for fiscal year '24 in the 5310 category, there's going to be $96,940. Fiscal year *24 local, we also have $24,235. And then total, we are gonna have $121,175. And then for CCSB 2, which is going to mainly be for the IT equipment, replacing tablets and mounting software and all of that kind of stuff. The first one was specifically for the vans. We are gonna have in fiscal year '24, 5310, $22,786. Fiscal year '24 state funding, we are gonna have $4,557. Fiscal year '24 for local funding, we are gonna have $1,939. If anyone has any comments, questions, or concerns, please feel free to ask. Yep.
Yes, Ms. Carroll.
Yep.
So the numbers you just gave are different than what's on the slide for the last one, and then also different than what's in your packet. So what is the right number, the most updated one you just gave us?
Yes. I
You
believe.
said the last one was like $1,907, when it actually says $1,139.
$39, sorry, yes. What's on the slide is correct.
What's on the slide is correct.
Yes.
Okay, just wanna make sure we have it right for the record.
Thank you.
Motion approved.
Second? Second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor? Aye. Thank you. Ms. Ramos, I believe you have one more?
Yep. This one is going to be a little bit more straightforward. Sorry, my eyes are not good enough to see the mouse. There we go. Okay. So, can't get rid of me that easy. We have another TIP amendment, Safe Streets for All Traffic Safety and Operations. This one is focused on the city of Richmond. The city of Richmond received, this is the authorized project. Oh, yes, sorry. This one is in the authorized project phase. So again, we are just making sure we are crossing all of our Ts, dotting all of our Is, making sure everything is good to go. So for the background, the transportation improvement plans, investments and federal obligations for the next 4 years, Richmond has made requests to include a new project in the TIP for the inclusion of the Safe Streets for All funds. So this is a direct recipient grant. So this money went directly from the federal government to Safe Streets, to the city of Richmond for these improvements for their streets. And then, so for the new projects, we do require an amendment. We do have fiscal constraints, conformity review, public review, and RRTPO approval. So Richmond received funding through the bipartisan infrastructure law to, through the Safe Streets for All program. Richmond is in the process of helping with better managing speed, improving accessible routes for people of all ages and abilities, creating comprehensive streetlight management plans, screening and assessing people with mental health and substance abuse disorders to connect them to available services, and conducting roadway safety assessments using multidisciplined approach. This supports projects included in the constrained long-range plan for Connect RVA 2045, and these are inside of the 8-hour ozone maintenance area, however, they are classified as exempt. So the proposed obligations are as follows. The PE match is $446,629, and then the CN, the construction phase for the other is $2,200,000 $51,599. And then $1,762,516, and then $9,006,394. And then the total cost is going to be $13,461,137. So, and then the draft resolution is on page 49. And the TAC has recommended approval for the proposed TIP amendment as requested by Richmond.
Are there any questions? Seeing none, might I have a motion?
Move approval, Madam Chair.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Ramos. Ms. Heller.
Thank you so much. One second here. Where's a fun little exercise in looking somewhere you're not expecting to look? There we go.
It's on the minimize window in the corner.
Yeah, thank you. Make it a little bit bigger so I can share the right screen. One. Alrighty. So, thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, all. This next amendment that I am bringing to y'all today concerns a project grouping in the maintenance and traffic safety operations category. So this amendment falls within the authorization and implementation project portions of our transportation planning process. And then we're all pretty familiar with the TIPS functions and planning document for investments and federal obligations. We might be a little less familiar with project groupings. So project groupings are simply pots of funds for multiple projects of similar types that do not impact air quality or significantly impact the capacity of the regional transportation network. The reason why you might group projects is it allows for additional flexibility in implementation, as amendments are generally only needed if the total funding for that project grouping changes significantly. And this grouping that we are bringing to you today is being requested by VDOT. It will add $6,750,000 to the maintenance, safety, and operations project grouping in federal fiscal year 24. And the funding is provided through the Surface Transportation Block Grant Program, which provides flexible funding to states and localities for projects that preserve and improve the condition and performance of any highway, bridge, or tunnel that receives federal aid, as well as projects on public roads, projects containing pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure, and transit capital projects. This is the TIP block that highlights the addition of $6,750,000 to FY24 from the STBG. And today we are asking that the policy board accept the technical advisory committee's recommendation and approve this proposed TIP amendment. You can find this draft resolution on page 54, and I'd be happy to take any questions.
Do we have questions for Ms. Ramos? Seeing none, might I have a motion?
So moved.
Might I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm gonna just swap over to my second presentation. Okay. Alright, so thank you again. And this next TIP amendment that I'm bringing to y'all today concerns the creation of a new project that will rebuild the Arthur Ashe Boulevard Bridge that crosses over the CSX Railroad. So this is a new project, so it's very firmly within the authorization phase of the planning process. And because this is a new project with new funds being added, it does require that the TIP be amended. The City of Richmond is requesting this amendment. So the City of Richmond was awarded a total of $18,400,000 through the Rebuilding American Infrastructure with Sustainability and Equity Grant, the RAISE grant. The RAISE grant is a discretionary grant program that helps project sponsors
at the state and local levels complete critical freight and passenger transportation infrastructure projects. Of the total awarded, $1,360,000 will be added in federal fiscal year 25 for the engineering phase, and then $17,040,000 will be added to federal fiscal year 27 for the construction phase. And then remaining balances will be funded through local funding. This is just a map that highlights sort of where the bridge will be replaced. And then this shows dollar amounts that are being added to the project. So $1,360,000 allocated for engineering in FY 25, and $17,040,000 available for construction in FY 27. Again, today we're asking that the policy board accepts the tax recommendation to approve this. And your draft resolution is on page 59. Should anyone have any questions, I'm happy to take them.
Thank you, Ms. Heller. Are there any questions for Ms. Heller at this time? Seeing none, might I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Heller.
Thank you so much.
Mr. Bushing.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the board. I have 2 items for you this morning, and I will keep them brief. I know we're a little short on time. The first item today is a request for CMAQ funding for an existing project. So this is, as you can gather, a funding-related phase of the project. In terms of background, the Congestion Mitigation Air Quality Program is one of the 4 funding programs that the TPO actually controls and selects projects to award funds to. CMAQ is dedicated to projects that will reduce delay in emissions and improve air quality. So usually that's intersection improvements, transit, bicycle and pedestrian type projects. This project in particular is the Route 1 project at Hopkins and Harwood. It's improving the intersections. Essentially, it's a realignment of 2 offset intersections. It also includes sidewalks and stormwater improvement. This is a legacy project. So this project actually got started back in 1997. So we're trying to get this one to construction. So that's why we're here at the board today. Some of you may recall we came to the board last year about this time with a request for funding to be able to advertise the project. And so the board awarded funding, the city of Richmond contributed funding to that deficit. We were able to advertise. The project's been advertised 3 times now, and all of the bids each time have come back too high, beyond our budget. So what we're asking for today is some additional funding to be able to award the construction contract so we can get this project underway with construction and wrap it up and close it out. Just as a reminder, this board has over the past few years been working diligently to close out these legacy projects to improve our overall performance of our funding programs. So this image gives you a little bit of an overview and context of where it's at. You can see Hopkins and Harwood and Ingram. Those intersections all are very close to each other on Route 1. This is the sketch of what is proposed. So you can see it's realigning those intersections, closing off the Ingram piece of it so that it'll function as a single intersection, reducing delays from the close proximity of the existing intersections. And then there's the sidewalk and stormwater improvements that go with this. In terms of the request, when we came to you last year, the estimate was $17.5 million. Based on the bids that we've received, it looks like almost 20.9 is a more realistic estimate. And so the ask from the policy board today is to award an additional $1,084,443 in CMAQ funding. The balance, as you can see at the bottom, is for improvements that will be covered by the city of Richmond. So this is the request today. With the CMAQ funding, we are able to use closeout funds from previous projects. So we have money in previous fiscal years, so there will be no impact if the board chooses to do this on any of the other projects that are in our current CMAQ program. And so the TAC has recommended approval of this additional funding. There's a draft resolution of approval on page 67 for your consideration. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions for Mr. Bushing relative to this item?
Just one quick question. How long do you think it will take to get this in the back mirror, if you will?
I'll defer to VDOT on that one.
So less than the 27 years.
So the idea would be,
think so.
with this action today, the CTB could award the project at their upcoming meeting later this month.
Excellent. Okay, very good. Madam Chair, I move approval.
He beat you.
Oh, Lord.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Jeez.
Thank you again, Madam Chair. This is the last item we have for you today. This is the functional classification update. So this touches all the parts of the process. It's not an individual piece of the transportation planning process. What is functional classification? It's basically a way that we categorize the roads based on the role that they play and the service that they provide. You can see the image on the right here, but basically the broad strokes, there's three categories. Arterials, which are really focused on moving you from A to B. Their role is really getting people around from major destinations to other major destinations. Then we get down to collector roads, which are really those roads which connect those arterials down to your local streets. And then finally, your local streets, that's where your businesses, your homes, all front on those. That's really where traffic is loaded into the network. So based on where you fall on that spectrum, you have more or less access to adjoining land, the speeds are higher. It's just a way of classifying how the road network works. This is a federal requirement, and there's guidance from the federal government on how we're to do this, and it's VDOT's responsibility to create a classification for the entire road system in the state. After every census, we go back and review that map and make sure that it's up to date, that we've captured any changes since the last census, and as well as correcting any mistakes that might have been in there that we've noticed. And VDOT prepares the draft, and the MPO's role is to agree. So we have a chance to review and approve or make recommendations for changes. And then once we have that concurrence, we send it to VDOT, who then prepares it and submits it to Federal Highway, showing that the MPOs have all agreed with the proposed changes. So why does it matter? As I mentioned, it touches all sorts of pieces of the transportation planning process. In terms of planning for the MPO side, we're mostly interested in projects that are on those arterials and above, connecting major destinations throughout our region. Air quality conformity is focused, again, primarily on those arterials, the larger roadways, and the impact that they'll have. Our travel demand model is also primarily focused on collectors and arterials, the bigger roadways in the network. In terms of funding, this functional classification helps to determine which projects are eligible for federal dollars, as well as CVTA regional dollars. It also factors into the formula for how maintenance payments are determined for localities that maintain their own roadways. It impacts design, whether we, access management, how far we space apart driveways, how is the road eligible for traffic calming, so can we put things in to slow traffic down. That would be depending on whether it's a local road or if we're looking at an arterial. It also impacts things like how often we maintain and do inspections, or how often we're mowing the grass. So it really touches all aspects of planning, funding, designing, and managing our road system. And so that's why it has an important role. And this isn't a comprehensive list, so there's a lot more if you're interested. But in terms of what we're proposing today, it's a relatively minor change in the grand scheme. So the primary change is actually including all of the interchanges and the ramps. That, as you can see, all of our ring roads, so 288, 295, 150, they all have the ramps all added in. So those ramps were not previously included. This is just making sure that those are captured. It also captures some new segments that might have been missing before. Airport Drive is an example in Eastern Henrico. So that's a project that was built in the past decade. So it's one that's been captured in here now. Some of the other big changes, and the biggest one you can see is at the top of the map, that red line, is upgrading the classification of Route 1 in Hanover and Ashland. And that's basically going from a minor arterial to a major arterial, still an arterial. But the idea here is that we have made a lot of improvements and investment that really is serving as more of an alternative to 95 in a lot of ways. And this also recognizes those investments. And then there were a few smaller changes which were more to address like stubs, where there was a missing segment somewhere, or like the example around Stony Point Fashion Park, the ring road around the mall was erroneously identified as a ramp instead of a collector road for all of the businesses and apartments around there. So fixing some of those errors as well. So that is the proposal, the changes. There was a link in your agenda packet if you want to look at them more in depth. But the technical advisory committee has reviewed this, so all your planners and engineers took a look at this and did agree to move forward with this classification as proposed. There's a draft resolution on page 70 in your agenda packet, which is the format that VDOT needs for the approval. So we're asking you to review that and asking for approval today. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Do we have any questions for Mr. Cushing at this? Yes,
Where would
Mr. Carroll.
if the public wanted to review this document and see it, where would they go to actually be able to look at it?
In terms of the mapping, so that link that is in the agenda packet is publicly accessible. So there's the map there that would show what the proposed changes are for this.
But someone would have to actually open up the agenda packet and then hit the link to find it, right?
Yes, that is correct.
I would just like to make it easier for the public to find it,
Okay.
rather than having, they're gonna go on like, well, where do you find it? Oh, I gotta go into this agenda packet to find it. I think we should have the link separate of the agenda packet, so if someone clicks on it,
They can
to
go.
look for this, they can click on it, open it right up. I just think we should make things a little bit more accessible.
We'll work on that, Mr. Cushing, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Might we have a motion?
So move, Madam Chair.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Bushy.
Thank you.
We will proceed to agency and committee reports. Mr. Parsons? Oh, yes, Mr. Parsons, CBTA.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Morning.
I wanted to point your attention to page 72 in the agenda packet for the CBTA update. Just a couple of things to highlight. We did have elections in August. They were delayed a little bit this year. Those usually happen in July at the start of the fiscal year, but Mr. Davis was elected as FY25 chair. And Mr. Nelson, Reverend Nelson, was elected as vice chair. So we have Hanover and Henrico in the leadership positions for the full authority. We also had elections for our technical advisory committee and finance committee. Those notes are in the agenda packet as well. A couple highlights on action items that took place at our August 9th full authority meeting. The authority voted to direct me to draft a letter to the Commonwealth Transportation Board. There was an additional $7.5 million identified through the FY24 budget process by the General Assembly. And working closely with VDOT, with Mr. Riblet and his team, we identified two potential landing spots for that $7.5 million and are making a recommendation to the Commonwealth Transportation Board. So that's exciting. That's money that we did not anticipate having available. So I am awaiting feedback from the CTB at one of their next meetings. And the two projects that we identified, one was in the city and one was in Chesterfield County. The city was a $4.5 million for a trailhead at Kanawha Plaza, so right across the river. And the second was in Chesterfield, Route 1, Food Lion to Falling Creek Wayside. This was in the amount of $3 million. So that's a segment that's in between the city and the current Design Build 2, which is constructing a full section from the Appomattox River all the way up through Colonial Heights, Petersburg, and into Chesterfield County. So we're continuing to move forward with that. Many of you did note or were in attendance for the groundbreaking of the fall line at Bryant Park over the past few weeks. That was a very well-attended event, and that marked the initial effort by the city of Richmond to get the fall line moving within the city boundaries. So we're excited about that and continuing to see these announcements over the next few months. Finance Committee is moving forward with continuing to have serious discussions about bond financing for additional projects in the region. We are looking at two different tracks right now. One is looking at a validation process, which to go over quickly it's basically ensuring that when the authority decides to issue bonds, it stands up in court and is much more solid in terms of being defensible and an understanding. Because we have not issued bonds before, this is a new effort by the CBTA, so it's really just ensuring that we have a smooth process when we get to that point. And then the second direction for bond financing is identifying the projects and working with our technical advisory committee to understand the biggest needs in the region and make sure that we have a project list that is ready to go when the authority is ready to make those decisions. So we have our upcoming meetings starting next week. Our TAC is meeting on Monday, the Finance Committee is meeting on Wednesday, and then our next full authority meeting is the end of September on the 27th. So if anyone has any questions or wants to follow up with me later, I'd be happy to have that conversation. Thank you, ma'am.
Mr. Parsons. Ms. Schickel.
Thank you. I'll just give you a couple of highlights. Our newsletter went out on Tuesday, and included in that is an update on our rural transportation analysis. So in our smaller jurisdictions, Charles City, Goochland, Hanover, New Kent, and Powhatan, our rural communities, we are working on a public engagement effort right now to assess the transportation needs relative to transit in those communities. So if you are interested in helping us spread the word, we are looking for assistance to fill out this short survey and participate in the mapper that we have online. Public Outreach Committee met a week or so ago and talked through the different opportunities we have also to be able to connect with members of the community that don't feel as comfortable or don't have access to the digital format. So we can talk offline about the different strategies that we have for that. We are trying to make 2 touch points in each of those communities that I mentioned in person to be able to be present where residents and community members are. So I can also follow up after this meeting if you're interested to know when and where we will be in your community to be able to connect with residents. And we've had a fairly robust outreach already with anchor institutions in each of those rural communities to help identify the best places and spaces along with some of our community's project champions. So just wanted to bring that to your attention. And then in addition to that, I will endeavor at next week's full commission meeting to loop the actions taken today with regard to the adoption of the scenario planning process, Pathways to the Future, and how that will connect on the Plan RVA front with how we will use that as the basis for our regional planning efforts beyond transportation. So kind of stay tuned on that. And then one other item to circle back to actions taken today. Mr. Parsons and I are working on developing the agenda for the joint annual meeting to be scheduled in December. And so I look forward to being able to connect that project timeline to the long-range transportation plan and have that discussion around what the 3 regional bodies view as the transportation needs and priorities for the region and how we can feed that in, I hope, to the discussion. So more to come on that, but those are some of the highlights.
Thank you, Ms. Schickel. Ms. Torres, GRTC.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple updates. We are progressing both in our Western BRT extension study as well as our North-South BRT study. There are 2 public meetings that are set for both of them. September 16th is the North-South, and that is at Main Street Station at 5 o'clock. And there are some other engagements that can happen if you can't attend that. There are another one at September 10th at St. Paul's Catholic Church at 9:30. At Downtown Transfer Station, September 11th at 11. And then September 12th at Whole Street Branch Public Library from 3. And then we also have a virtual option on September 19th. So lots of opportunities for engagement. And we will also have a survey that will become live, I believe, September 30th. Sorry, it ends September 30th. So I think between now and September 30th. And then for the Western, that public meeting is set at Libby Mill Library for October 1st at 5:30.
Thank you, Ms. Torres. And again, thank you for the support for the October 3rd event. Really appreciate that. Ms. Dean, RMTA.
Yes, good morning. Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple of items. The first is we have a new board chair, Mr. Dean Lynch, who is a Chesterfield appointee, and we have a new Vice Chair, Dr. Yuana Dabney, who is a City of Richmond appointee. The summer is usually very quiet for us, but this summer, our board actually met in August to vote on the issuance of some debt and to fund our capital program. And so many thanks to Chesterfield County and to Henrico County who have approved that issuance. I'm looking forward to going to the city for their approval as well. This will allow for us to continue our capital plans to improve the system for the course of the years. Will over the course of the lifetime of the debt will save us a little over $1 million.
Thank you. We'll proceed, DRPT.
So I have no major updates, but I just wanted to take the time to say thank you to Miles, Carey, and Ansley for the work that they did to help us with our 5310 amendments. Just as a quick background, that was related to our submission of our FTA application, and so they were able to be responsive and help us get that through in order to make sure we can issue our contracts come October 1st. So I just wanted to extend a thank you to you.
Thank you. Mr. Ripley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple of quick updates. CTB did not meet in August, so updates in our report are from their July meeting. One thing I would like to point out is there was an approval for a change in the state of good repair prioritization process. Excuse me. Essentially for bridge projects with a condition rating that's kind of on a cusp level, it actually allows for funding to be placed on those bridges and structures earlier than previous prioritization processes would have allowed. That's a very proactive and good step that allows a lot more flexibility in the state of good repair process. Next meeting of the CTB is actually out in Roanoke, September 17th. It'll be out there with a local programs workshop with probably many of your staffs there as well. Smart Scale, very brief update. Thank you again to all of your staffs that had submitted applications. VDOT staff and DRPT staff are currently working on the validation of the information submitted. We're with the goal of completing the scoring process for those applications later this calendar year with the scores to be published, the draft scores and staff recommendation after the first of the year. There are, again, you guys are very well aware that progress is proceeding on the Fall Line Trail project, Design Build 1, well under construction. We're about a year away from expected completion of Design Build 1, Design Build 2. The RFP should go out later this month for that one, and we're certainly hopeful for good bids on that. 64 gap widening, segment A and C, obviously already awarded. You see the activity on that. RFP was released in June for segment B. Again, hoping for good bids on that one. Last 2 points, we've got a willingness for a public hearing that requests can be submitted by September 10th for the I-64 Oilville Road Roundabout project in Goochland County. There's also a citizen information meeting scheduled September 17th for the Mayo Bridge replacement project in the city of Richmond. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Ripplett at this time? Thank you, Mr. Ripplett. FHWA, Mr. Rucker.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Good morning, everyone. Nothing significant to add from the Federal Highway Administration. I will say that I'm extremely pleased with the move towards the scenario planning effort with respect to your updated long-range transportation plan. It's a wonderful move. Thank you.
Thank you. Other business members, any comments? Okay, seeing none, I'll go to the next item, which is the next meeting. Again, you have the QR code, so don't forget to log in and sign in and all of that in preparation for that meeting. And as mentioned before, there's squirrel tickets. So don't forget.
Don't forget the squirrel.
Don't forget the squirrel tickets. You may follow up with staff, Martha and Sid, in that regard. If there is nothing else for the good of the order, this meeting stands adjourned. Thank you.